Hi friends, myself Dr. Ekta, and today I'll be speaking about the muscle physiology. Basically, you can muscle physiology, or you can say that functioning of the muscle, normal functioning of the muscle. So I'll be speaking about that basically, and before that, I'll be talking about the various types of muscles in the body, which are like skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and visceral muscle. Three types of muscles are there in the body and our body. So, uh, there's an involuntary muscle, and the involuntary muscle is the cardiac muscle and the visceral muscle. The visceral muscle basically. Uh, is the smooth muscle, or you can say that the muscles which are forming the viscera, the organs of our body, and they are the smooth muscles. They are non-striated muscle, and the skeletal muscle. As we know that it is a striated muscle and it is a striped muscle, plus it is supplied by the somatic nervous system, and it is under voluntary control. So it we can move the skeletal muscle like the biceps, triceps, gastrocnemius, soleus, hamstring. These muscles are skeletal muscles, and we can move them under our control. Okay, whenever we require to like flex the arm, we can just do it under our wish and control. So when we want to like move the hand, we can just like do the movement with the intrinsic muscles. It is also a kind of a skeletal muscle. So skeletal muscles are under voluntary control, and the cardiac and the visceral muscles are in voluntary control, and they are under autonomic controls. We know about basic hints that about the autonomic nervous system, that is sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system that supplies the cardiac and the visceral muscle. Then especially the vagus nerve we heard about, that is controlling the visceras, the GIT especially. So it's the parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous. Okay, the hormonal, like there is a secretion of certain hormones from the organs, and there is like elimination of these hormones. So there is an optimum value of that hormone in your system, in your blood, that has to be not elevated, not reduced. So it has to be somewhere in that optimum range, and when it gets increased, it will cause a disturbance in your body. When it is decreased, it will cause a disturbance in your body. It same happens with thyroid, when it is hypo or hyper, and with parathyroid, it's also same hyper and hypo. And again, if you talk about the hypopituitarism, so all, like even diabetes, when you're not producing enough insulin to metabolize the glucose, so that is how it happens. When the production of that hormone is not sufficient enough for the normal functioning of the body, then it will cause a problem. And again, if it is like less or more, again it will cause the multisystemic problems. These like why I'm talking about, like there is a link between the muscle as well as these diseases, the movement and diseases. We are moving towards a sedentary lifestyle where we're just working from home, we're just sitting in our clinics and seeing patients. So there is this lifestyle in which there is lack of exercise, lack of movement, lack of that physical activity nowadays, and due to which diseases like endocrinal diseases, which I talked about, they are very much common now. Okay, and the movement, the exercise, the lifestyle is very, very much important when it comes to preventing these diseases. Okay, and as we see that India is a diabetic capital, so exercise plays a vital role in preventing these diseases from happening in the first place. One thing. Second thing, if you are already suffering from these diseases, okay, so these will help in reducing the severity of the disease, because anyways, this like there will be stress, there will be certain issues, there will be like the lifestyle disturbance, and which will like aggravate, which will cause the symptoms to flare up. Okay, and even in the reports you will see the changes. So those things are likely to happen uh, when the disease progresses. So these two things, one is preventing. If you're not suffering with these diseases, exercise helps in preventing these diseases. Second, um, it helps in reducing the severity of the disease. And the third thing is, if already disease is present, it will also help in reducing the complications of that disease. Okay, first, you can very well see that the light blue color is the F actin. Now, second. So this F actin, this is the fibrillar actin. It is formed by the G or the globular actin combined together, forming a polymer that is known as fibrillar actin. It is just like you can see that monomers, they combine together and form polymers, and forming an F actin. And the F actin is also bounded by this troponin protein and tropomyosin, which are the regulatory proteins which are binding that actin altogether. And we'll be talking about that, but before that, first we see the myosin structure. The myosin structure, as you can see, it is also forming the like you can say that a thick band or the dark band is mostly like contributed by this overlapping myosin and actin, which are forming the dark band or the A band. Now here you can see that the structure of myosin, it is like a helical structure, and you can see that there is this head, there is an arm, and also there is this body of that myosin. Okay, so there is like ATP binding site on the head, as you can see, and there is an actin binding site also in the head of the myosin. Now there are like the monomeric structure, like meromyosin, they combine together and form this myosin structure. This is the polymeric stage of that myosin. Okay, meromyosin. So we have studied in like a protein, when we have studied about the protein structure, they are like we know that all the amino acids, they combine together form proteins. So amino acids are simpler forms, they combine together and form bigger proteins. So it is like, in the same way you can understand that this is a meromyosin is a monomeric structure which combine together form polymers, and that is the myosin per se. Okay, and talking about the G actin, the same way, the monomeric structure, the G actin, the globular actin, it combines together and form a polymeric structure, that is the F actin. Okay, and so this is a monomeric form of G actin, or G actin you can say, and this G actin combines together and form the F actin, which is the polymeric form of actin. Okay, this is the structure. Okay, or you can also say that fibrillar actin. So this is a monomeric form and this is a polymer. And talking about the structure of myosin, so meromyosin is the monomeric form, combines together to form polymeric form, that is the myosin. And we had seen that there is this head which has this ATP binding site. And there is this actin binding site on the head. There's this arm and his tail. Okay, so this is structure. Basically, the simplest structure you can draw for the myosin. This is the tail, this is the arm, and this is the head. Okay, and this Polymeric former or F-actin, it is a helical structure where the two strands of fibrillar actin join together to form this helix. And okay, so basically during muscle contraction or there is this interaction between actin and myosin head. Okay, there is this actin binding site on the myosin head which interacts with the actin. Okay, so with this interaction only the muscle contraction is happened. So there are two proteins, that is troponin and tropomyosin. They are regulatory proteins, and you can see that this is the helical structure of actin, F-actin. Okay, and the tropomyosin is binding all over this F-actin, and it is all covering the myosin binding sites over actin. So it is covering and sealing that site. Okay, so it is these sites on actin are unexposed, and so because of that the interaction between the actin and myosin doesn't occur. Okay, this is the stage of relaxation where the muscle is relaxed. It is when there is an interaction occurs between the actin and myosin, then comes the muscle contraction. Okay, after that, so here the interaction of the myosin and actin is hindered by the tropomyosin, which is sealing or blocking the active sites, or you can say that the active sites on actin are sealed and covered by tropomyosin. And there is also this protein which is like a button shaped over the tropomyosin, and it is known as troponin. So the blue color structure which you all see is the troponin, and the red color structure which you are seeing is the tropomyosin, and these two structures are enclosing that F-actin. They are binding that F-actin. Now it's study. So there are like okay, I'll just explain the structure of troponin. Okay, so there are like three types of proteins, I, C and T in troponin. And what happens is like as you can see the structure of troponin is like a switch on and off button which is there on the tropomyosin. And when there is like button on, like when you switch on the troponin, okay, the tropomyosin slides over the F-actin and exposes those active sites on actin which can integrate or which can interact with the myosin, okay, and cause the muscle contraction. Now how it happens? Okay, there is this switch on and switch off which happens with the calcium ion. Okay, and when it interacts with the C protein of the troponin, here it occurs the conformational change in the troponin. Okay, conformational change meaning what? There is this interaction of this protein in a particular structure in troponin. Okay, so there is a structural change in that structure of troponin, and that change causes the sliding of tropomyosin over the F-actin. Okay, and due to the sliding of tropomyosin, it exposes it exposes the myosin binding sites on actin. Now it can freely interact with myosin to cause the muscle contraction. Okay, so with this interaction with the myosin, it forms cross bridges, which I'll talk about in a while. Okay, these cross bridges are formed between actin and myosin when these sites are exposed on actin, and it interacts with what? It interacts with the myosin in the actin binding site, which is there in the myosin head, and cause the formation of the cross bridges, and which later leads to the muscle contraction. Okay, so there is a sliding theory which is due to the sliding of that myosin head over the actin, and due to that interaction, due to that movement, a muscle contraction is caused. Now we'll talk about few structural proteins also. We have talked about the contractile proteins, that is actin and myosin. Then we talked about this regulatory protein. These were the contractile proteins. Okay, these are the regulatory proteins, and these are the structural proteins. So the structural proteins are actinin, titin, and desmin. Okay, the actinin binds the actin to the Z line. Titin, which is very important, it binds Z to M line. M line is the middle of the sarcomere, which is the muscle unit, or you can see that the structural and functional unit of the skeletal muscle is the sarcomere, and in the middle of the sarcomere is the M line, and there is a structural protein known as titin, which is also, you can say it as ZM, okay, because it links Z line to M line. Okay, one sarcomere is separated from another sarcomere by Z lines. Okay, then there is desmin binds the Z line to plasma membrane, and we know that so the plasma membrane of muscle is known as sarcolemma. Okay, cytosol is known as sarcoplasm, endoplasmic reticulum of muscle is known as sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, so as you can see, the structure of the muscle fiber, and you can see that there is an alteration of the bands, that is actin and myosin, and there is this thin filament known as actin, and this thick filament, that is myosin, and we have seen the structure of the actin and myosin before, and there is this, now you can see that there are like A band and I band, which I have talked about. The A band is the anisotropic band, and it is formed as you can see in this picture. A band is formed by overlapping myosin and actin, and the I band is formed by the actin filaments. Okay, and there is this H band also, which is the middle zone of the sarcomere, which is called as the H band. In the middle of that H band, uh, there is this line in the middle of the H band, which is known as M line. Okay, and together this one unit of that muscle fiber is formed by the sarcomere. So one unit is separated by the other with the help of this Z line, which is shown in the red line structure, okay, as you can see in the picture. Now one sarcomere, it contains, okay, we talked about isotrophic and isotropic. One sarcomere contains half two half I bands, as you can see in the picture below, with the brown structure that is showing actin and myosin. You can see that half I band, okay, two half I band plus one A band contributes to one sarcomere. Okay, so in one sarcomere, one A band is there and two half I bands are there. Two half I bands and one A band together forms one sarcomere. Okay, and let's talk about again, this is all about this the structural thing, that is the actin and myosin. And we have talked about forming of this cross bridges which happens between the actin and myosin when this calcium binds with the troponin, and it exposes the site on the actin filament, and again, because of the exposed site, now the actin filament interacts with the myosin head, and we know that there is a site of the actin binding site on the myosin head. So these two interact with each other, and now first there is an interaction, there is this formation of this cross bridge, and then there is the sliding of that cross bridge, or you can see that the sliding of the myosin head on the actin, which is responsible for this muscle contraction. And it happens because of that production of ATP. Okay, so ATP is required for the muscle contraction. Okay, first there is this interaction of the calcium ion with the troponin, which causes the, you can say that, which slides the tropomyosin, and it causes the interaction of the actin and myosin. Now the interaction of the actin and myosin strengthens more, and it causes the sliding of the myosin head over the actin. Okay, I'm talking about the head because the only myosin head interacts with the actin when the sites are exposed, and it of and it, so let's talk about the sources of energy for the muscle. Okay, so during rest, also during relaxation phase of the muscle also, it requires ATP. It Why it needs the that energy? Because it has to maintain a muscle tone during rest, and it also maintains that resting membrane potential, which is the sodium ATPase pump. Okay, so it has to maintain that RMP potential, due to which it requires an ATP. Again, the synthesis of chemical substance like glycogen, so it requires ATP. So during the resting phase also, during the relaxation phase also, the muscle requires ATP, and during the muscle contraction also it requires ATP. So I'll talk about the generation of action potential afterwards. Okay, but it during the contraction, but it's just all the important thing that during the contraction as well as in relaxation, the muscle requires ATP. Okay, and here it is when the muscle is, when you are exercising and during the time of strenuous exercise, what are the sources from where it the muscle gets ATP. So there is a phosphagen system, there is a glycolysis which occurs in 60 seconds, and after 1 minute the ETC or the Krebs cycle heads in generating the ATP. Okay, so first, in the first 5 seconds when you start the exercise, okay, the ATP is generated, that is already being stored in the muscle, that is being utilized in the first 5 seconds. Afterwards, if you continue that exercise during the first 15 seconds, there is this production of ATP from creatinine phosphate, okay, and through this enzyme known as creatinine kinase, this ATP production occurs, and this synthesized ATP is utilized for the contraction of the muscle, okay. And after the 15 second, during the first or within the first minute, there is this glycolysis which helps in the generating of ATP, okay. And the glucose, as we know, that the end product of is pyruvate, okay. And when there is insufficient of oxygen, of course the lactic acid is being formed from the pyruvate. And if there is a sufficiency of oxygen, if there is like enough oxygen being there, if you're doing some aerobic exercise, there's enough oxygen, this oxygen delivery is more to the system, then the pyruvate gets converted into acetyl coenzyme, and that is the end product, and then it synthesizes ATP through Krebs cycle, an electron transport chain. So after 1 minute, there is this Krebs cycle and ETC chain which are responsible for generating the ATP, and more number of ATP. As you can see that 40 ATPs are produced during that oxidative phosphorylation, which is occurring, which is causing the formation of this much amount of ATP. So more production of ATP is there, and in glycolysis only 2 ATPs are formed, less production is there, and the anaerobic phase is there when there is, okay, insufficient oxygen is there, and this glycolysis is generating the ATP, and from the glucose the lactic acid production is there. And after 1 minute, basically the Krebs cycle and this ETC transport chain, that is electron transport chain, that helps in the generation of ATP, okay. And there are other sources also, like free fatty acids, okay. And during relaxation phase, as we talked about, there is this during the resting phase, the muscle requires ATP. During the exercise phase, now during the recovery phase also, the muscle requires ATP. And why it is so? Because it has to reform the ATP which is being utilized, and the creatinine phosphate also to be generated, and it has also to remove, it should also remove the lactic